Good morning, Year 10. So, yet again, we have another inspirational video featuring the dog Lexi. This is about the actors and directors, specifically for epic theatre, because that is the style of performance that we're looking at for Blood Brothers. I am going to try and model some example ideas of what you could write about. And I'm going to sort of film myself writing it so you can see the kind of different layers and the different things I've been talking about previously, okay? So what we are talking about first of all are the roles and responsibilities. Apologies for my writing. For epic theatre. And we are focusing on an actor and a director. Okay, so I'm just going to lay this example out in a table for you right now, but I will explain more of what you can do later. So we can talk about generic skills to start with in terms of an actor. So first of all, let's say focus, commitment, to turn up to rehearsals. We would have to research, to develop character. We would also... Okay, so to save your sanity and watching me writing terribly, I've just sort of started to add some ideas. So for an actor, these are for generic actor and director skills. Obviously they need to focus, they need to be at auditions, they need to show commitment and be reliable to make sure they turn up to rehearsals at the right time at the right place, even in the right clothes, because if your rehearsal is quite physical, for example, if you're doing a movement-based scene, if you've got to dance, then you need to be in appropriate clothes. They need to be able to research so that they understand the context. For example, with Blood Brothers, they may well have to learn a Liverpool accent, okay, if they can't already do it. They would have to develop their character. So again, using that research and taking into account the context of Liverpool and the social class system and the different themes within the play, they would have to develop their character according to that. They would have to develop their character in rehearsals. Obviously they have to learn lines so that they can then add expression to it. They have to be able to work as a team to collaborate with their other cast members, and an actor has to be open-minded in order to take direction. So moving on to the director, I've jotted some ideas down for this. So again, this is generic to being a director at the moment. First of all, I squeezed in research here, but that really comes first if you're thinking about the sort of order that you'd apply all of these skills and undertake these responsibilities. So research has to come first so that you know basically what your play is all about, whether that is a play that somebody else has written, that you are producing, that you are directing, or if it's your own play, you've got to make sure you understand where you're coming from, so that you can then communicate that. And then that you then have to cast some roles. Not all massive directors are going to be involved in this, but obviously they're going to have a say in what they want, because you might have a casting director if you're working in a production team of that size. But it may well be that the director casts the roles and assigns the actors to the different characters. The director has to communicate a vision, so it has to be able to tell the actors and the performers what it is that they are actually looking for, so the actors know where they're going with this. They have to plan rehearsals and obviously deliver them. They might be really structured, they might be really open and improvised, but the director still has to kind of plan and deliver so they know what they want to achieve by the end of that session. They have to encourage teamwork and build that teamwork with the cast. They also have to know the strengths and skills of their team. So we're now going to move on to think about what specific skills they might need for epic theatre. And for this we have moved to red pen. So for an actor to work in epic theatre, they need to understand the context and the message. So epic theatre will always have some kind... Oh, the dog's awoken. No, just have a little shuffle. Okay. There will always be some kind of underlying message that the director, that the writer wants the audience to think about. And this is going to come into play for both the actor and the director. Okay. Okay, so moving forward, we have got some specific skills for an actor during epic theatre. So building on what we had previously with the generic roles and responsibilities, making the research specific, obviously, to the play and to the message they're getting across. So, for example, in Blood Brothers, it is based on this story which really explores social class. So, the importance of researching Liverpool in that particular time period, which in Blood Brothers spans from the early 60s or late 50s, early 60s through to the very early 80s. Understanding what was going on at that time is really, really important, because for Mickey, it really impacts how the lower class live, because you've got the government who are in charge at the time. The 70s is when Maggie Thatcher came to power. She's the one who closes the mines and a lot of the factories, and that is the reason Mickey loses his job at the end of the play, and that's really what sends him on a downward spiral with his mental health. His relationship with Linda breaks down. He gets addicted to antidepressant drugs, and he ends up obviously in that tragic incident at the end with Eddie. So that is really the downward spiral for him, and where the play takes a turn for the worse in terms of the tension and how dramatic it is, and how it makes the audience think that these political decisions have such an impact on people's lives. But obviously the people making the decisions, so Maggie Thatcher, she's not impacted by it, or she wasn't impacted by it, but she's the one who gets to make these decisions, which is an ongoing argument obviously in politics anyway. But understanding that and how to communicate that is absolutely essential, because you cannot mess that up. There are people in the audience who would have lived through those times and potentially affected by it as well, who may well have been in a similar position to Mickey. And if you're going to communicate a message, you've got to do it properly. You can't do it half-heartedly. You have to know exactly what you're doing, how you're going to do it, and how your character would be a part of that. There are then particular techniques used in epic theatre which make the audience think. All of these break the fourth wall, and they break the sense of naturalism. So naturalism is when we see and experience theatre and performances that is like real life, that we can identify with, that we can emotionally attach with, and that we can sort of put ourselves in the position of. But these techniques allow us to sort of detach from a slight sense of emotion and actually think about what is being presented to us. So, for example, multi-rolling. We know the narrator multi-rolls in Blood Brothers. We know that, although it's not multi-rolling, obviously the actors who play Mickey and Eddie at a young age play the same, are the same actors who play it at an older age as well. So they take us through the story as the same actor. We know that, like I said, the narrator multi-roles, but the narration also breaks the fourth wall, makes the audience think about particular themes that is often underlying. So the narrator often makes it explicit what the underlying message is that maybe have been inferred or sort of suggested through a scene, and he really hones it in for the audience and sort of refines it and narrows it down so that we can sort of clarify what we might have been thinking. For example, in the scene where Mrs. Lyons is trying to convince Mrs. Johnstone to give away her baby, we can see her trying to manipulate Mrs. Johnstone into giving that baby away by using superstition, because she knows that Mrs. Johnstone is quite religious, she's quite superstitious, and she is worried because the lower class are arguably, or were back then actually, less educated, so they often looked for comfort in maybe the superstition side of things, to sort of try and give them a bit of hope at times, like if they did certain things then things would come right for them, whereas the upper class would have had a much more grounded upbringing in terms of sort of reality, and even though they might not seem as down to earth because they live in a different slightly different world back then, they would have had any sort of superstitions brushed aside. And we can see that when Mrs. Lyons then reacts to Eddie when he comes in talking about the bogey monster, I think it is. So the narration there really explains to us that Mrs. Lyons is using superstition to try and manipulate Mrs. Lyons. So it really kind of clarifies what we may well have been thinking throughout the scene. We know that singing and dancing is in Blood Brothers. The songs help to tell the story. It can be argued that, or the show is a musical as well, but obviously for the sake of this, we are looking at epic theatre. If you wanted to reference musicals within your research, that is absolutely fine. That is not a problem at all. But the style that we are focusing on is epic theatre. The singing and dancing obviously brings a sort of, in some ways, it brings a sense of light relief. However, in other ways, it may well increase the tension and the atmosphere, depending on what the scene is. SPAS that I've put at the bottom, we've only mentioned that really, really briefly. And that is, if you can't read that, because my S's are a bit funny, it is spelled SPAS. It is a technique that was really pioneered by Bertolt Brecht. Actually, let me write his name in a, let's go green for Bertolt Brecht. And he really came up with the idea of political theatre, which is where epic theatre sort of comes from. That was all Bertolt Brecht. Okay, I hope you can see that. BERTOLT can't even read my own writing. So Bertolt Brecht really pioneered epic theatre with that political message. SPAS is a technique where we may well be in quite a light-hearted mood. There might be quite a sort of happy scene going on, but all of a sudden there's something that snaps us into reality, and the narrator often does that, and we see it with the changes of light as well, where the actors may well be in a freeze. For example, the scene where they become blood brothers, so they've just met, it's all quite a comical scene, and as soon as they become blood brothers and they join hands in the middle, the music changes, the light changes, and the narrator comes on, and there's a much more intense atmosphere. And that is to an extent, that is a use of SPAS, because we've got the quite light-hearted scene, and it's being contrasted with then all of a sudden our mood changes in the audience. So moving on to the skills, roles and responsibilities for a director in epic theatre. Obviously, they're going to come within the rehearsal stages, because when the performance happens, their job is pretty much done. Lexi's actually start to look a bit interested in this. I think she's trying to read my writing. So in terms of the director, obviously they have to continue to communicate that message. They have to be really specific on what the message of the play is, because for epic theatre, that is, remember, the whole point. They have to make sure they are aware of the audience interpretation. So for example, they need to understand when the best part is to break the fourth wall. So the fourth wall, again, we've spoken about this. If you imagine the stage is a box, epic theatre breaks that fourth wall between the actors on stage and the audience. Okay, so it's an imaginary wall, obviously, but naturalism maintains that fourth wall as if it was a real life scenario going on. However, epic theatre breaks that fourth wall, again, to detach us from reality and to make us think about what is being presented. Oh, there's Tink the cat just come in. Yeah, she's looking for some biscuits. Okay. So roles and responsibilities for the director: breaking the fourth wall, understanding when the best time is to do that, and to make sure it's going to have meaning. Okay, all of the techniques are in a performance for a reason. The director has put them there, the playwright has put them there to make the audience think, to engage the audience, and to develop the story. There is a reason for everything, which is why we do so much analysis in drama. So breaking the fourth wall could be when the narrator enters and how he enters. So for example, the lights, the sound, his use of voice. The director has to understand how best to portray that, so he can communicate that to the actors and to the tech team. Making the audience think, what we've kind of already spoken about and what I've mentioned. But again, knowing the best timing for these techniques in order to communicate that, in order to make the audience think, so it has the most impact, and has the impact that they require based on the style of epic theatre and based on what the message is. So for Blood Brothers, obviously they want the audience to think about social class, they want them to think about the politics behind it, they want them to think about the contrast in terms of the differences, they want them to think about the impact of superstition, how people can be manipulated, They want them to think about even the use of guns. You've got the toy guns being used in the kids scene. You have got the real guns being used in the final scene. So there's all sorts of themes and issues there that the director is going to want to communicate, and use these techniques in order to do that the most effective way. So that is my guide for now. Once you have got this kind of table written up, you can then start to build them into paragraphs. So here is how you could structure your ideas to take them from that table and make them into a paragraph. So we're looking at a peel paragraph for this. So firstly, make your point, reference the responsibility or skill that you're talking about. And then your example is given the example of that skill when creating a piece of epic theatre. I've just spoken you through some ideas for that. The next E is explain why this skill is important to epic theatre. And finally, you're going to use the L to link your explanation. So you can link your explanation to Blood Brothers by taking an example of what happens in the play and what impact that has on the audience. Or you can link your explanation to epic theatre in general, in terms of what it allows the performance to achieve. And same kind of principle in terms of what impact it can have on the audience. I'm now just going to write out an example paragraph, but I am going to just add that on to the end, but I won't talk for too much longer because we are already up to just over 16 minutes.